you likely have been told one of these 10 big diabetes lies. Stay tuned to find out. Hi, and welcome to Nature's Path to Wellness. My name is Wendy, and today we're going to be diving into the 10 big diabetes lies you've probably been told. We've been in a position for many years to believe that we're to trust the people that are in the medical field for all of our health concerns. Why not? Doctors have years of schooling and degrees, and they seem to know all that there is to know about our bodies and how they work, right? Well, partially, but I encourage you to ask your family doctor, general practitioner, or, somebody like that, just how much nutrition training that they've had while they were in med school. I'd be interested to know. So let's get into the 10 big diabetes lies that you've likely been told. Number one, diabetes is chronic and progressive. Probably the one that just about everybody has heard, I would imagine, and that no matter what you do, you will eventually succumb to all of its complications and probably die likely 10 to 20 years younger than you would have without type 2 diabetes. Wrong. Diabetes is a condition that can be prevented, controlled, and even reversed. And it can be done with nutrition and nutrition alone. Sure, exercise, of course, is preferred, but you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes with nutrition and nutrition alone. Doctors need to stop telling their patients that there's no way to reverse type 2 diabetes. And if your current doctor is telling you this, it might be time to consider seeing a new doctor or possibly looking into seeing a holistic nutritionist who is well versed in type 2 diabetes. I believe with all health concerns that 99% of the cure is getting to the root of the issue. And when it comes to type 2 diabetes, the cure involves removing what is causing diabetes from your diet in the first place. All right, number two, you must be obese in order to have type 2 diabetes. Wrong again. And this is most concerning because doctors have led us to believe that we need to be obese in order to have type 2 diabetes. So we have thousands of people walking around with insulin resistance, eating whatever they want, and they probably are on the road to having type 2 diabetes without even maybe knowing it. And you should know the symptoms of insulin resistance. And I will include a link down below in the description of this video of the 25 symptoms of insulin resistance, a video that I did recently. And consider getting your A1C checked as soon as you can so that you can have an indication of whether you are dealing with insulin resistance or perhaps maybe already have type 2 diabetes, and you can get on the road to doing something to reverse it right away. Most people actually who are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes have had insulin resistance maybe even up to 10 years before eventually being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And you should also know that if you decide to get your A1C checked, that 5.6 or lower is considered normal, and that anything above that is an indication that you are experiencing insulin resistance and may be on the way to developing type 2 diabetes, when most doctors will tell you anything below 7 is normal. So that is concerning too. All right. So, big diabetes lie number three that you've probably been told, you can only control type 2 diabetes with insulin. Wrong again. You ended up with type 2 diabetes because of a couple of things. You likely have been consuming processed foods that have hidden sugars and carbs and processed sugar for a long period of time and have had insulin resistance for years, likely without even knowing it. And so you're not actually lacking the insulin needed. In fact, you probably have too much insulin already in a condition called hyperinsulinemia. Again, my doctor had told me, oh, your body's not producing enough insulin. So definitely that wasn't right. Look at it this way. When you have an expensive car and it calls for premium fuel and you go around putting regular gas into the car, after a period of time, what begins to happen? The car begins to knock and ping, and show sign of other problems, right? So we could maybe put some fuel additive in the car for a while and help things along, but you're never really getting to the root of the issue. However, if we maintain, let's say we get a new vehicle and we maintain it according to the manufacturer's instructions with the fuel that's supposed to go in there and regular maintenance, the vehicle performs as it should. And our bodies are just the same. So, most doctors are quick to offer an easy solution. When you go in to see them, they'll probably want to offer you metformin in most cases. And metformin works by preventing something called gluconeogenesis. So, if you think about it as glucose and genesis, the creation of, right? So, that's the creation of glucose in the liver, as well as lessening the amount of sugar absorbed in the gastrointestinal tract and helping to increase insulin sensitivity in the cells. Doctors, however, don't provide information in most cases about maybe removing the carbs and the sugar and the processed foods that are loaded with hidden sugars from your diet. Instead, they'll say as it becomes difficult to manage your blood sugar levels, we can increase your dose of metformin and eventually maybe we can move on to insulin. In fact, when it comes to most recent studies, it shows that aggressive use of diabetes medication has neither stopped, slowed, or even reversed all cause mortality from diabetes complications. And in fact, the opposite was true. More problems actually resulted from the aggressive use of medications and insulin. Stop and think about that for a moment before you consider taking insulin or metformin. If we stop putting processed foods with added and hidden sugars and consuming processed sugar and so many carbs, and we begin to consume much less of those things and fill our plates more with veggies and good quality proteins, not too much, and more, some whole grains if that's your wish to do that, our bodies will actually begin to run as they were designed to once again. It should be further noted and emphasized that medications in no way prevent organ damage and failure since they fail to rid the body of sugar. Drugs will actually never cure what is actually a dietary issue. Big diabetes lie number 4: type 2 diabetes is genetic. Wrong again. Just because your mom or your dad or your grandma had type 2 diabetes does not automatically mean that you will develop this condition. You are more genetically predisposed to developing a condition known as hyperinsulinemia, but you are absolutely in full control of whether you will develop type 2 diabetes or not. Number 5, the cause of type 2 diabetes is unknown. Wrong. Type 2 diabetes is essentially an inflammatory response to a constant barrage of carbs and sugar in your diet, known as chronic carbohydrate toxicity syndrome. When we understand that type 2 diabetes is really caused by too much insulin, we further understand that we need to control the amount of insulin in our bodies by controlling the amount of sugar and carbs that we consume. Big type 2 diabetes lie number 6. You must consume a certain number of carbs in your diet in order to be healthy. Wrong again. According to the AMDR, or the acceptable macronutrient distribution range, you will be told that you should be consuming 45 to 65% of your daily caloric intake in carbs. That's mind blowing. Here's the thing, it kind of reminds me of the food pyramid that we used to use back in the 1980s, where they told us that we should be consuming 6 to 11 servings of rice and bread and pasta per day. And they determined later that that was a lie. We were told by doctors that fat was bad. That again was a lie. Your body does not require 45 to 65% of your daily caloric intake in carbs to thrive as long as you are having enough healthy fats and proteins. It's important to note that you must have fats in your body, healthy fats, because we require essential fatty acids. And you must have protein because your body does require certain amino acids in order to function properly. Your body can, however, function with little to no carbs. Your amazingly designed machine, known as your body, will actually produce energy from fats stored in your body and what you take in. According to another guide known as the DRI, or Dietary Reference Intakes, you can consume as much as zero carbs. And as long as you're consuming, of course, the proper amount of fats and proteins, and your body is equipped to keep everything in homeostasis, which is balance. You probably do know that your red blood cells do require glucose in order to work properly. And so your body is designed to do something in the liver called gluconeogenesis, which is to produce glucose when your body needs it. And your body actually thrives, and especially your brain, amazingly off of ketones. So if you are on a zero carb diet, your body will produce ketones as another form of energy. So let's move on to number 7. Type 2 diabetes is all about high blood sugar. Wrong again. Most doctors want to focus solely on blood sugar and hyperglycemia and emphasize the need to control the blood sugars with blood sugar lowering medication, when in fact your issue is twofold. When dealing with type 2 diabetes, you are actually dealing, yes, with high blood sugars, but you are also dealing with a condition called hyperinsulinemia, so too much insulin. So there's not only too much sugar in the blood, but there's also too much insulin. And so, if somebody like a doctor would sit down and explain that to somebody, most people would start to understand that there's probably more need for a diet intervention than for medication, because when you start to understand why your blood sugars are elevated and why your insulin levels are elevated, it's not about medication. The problem is, I think most doctors assume that people will not want to change their diet. But when people come to the understanding that they need to remove the processed foods with the hidden sugars and the carbs and the processed sugar from their diet, their blood sugar levels will go down, their insulin levels will go down, and we don't need to take medication to do that. Instead, they mostly placate us and they tell us that, okay, you're gonna be started on the metformin. We're gonna manage this. We're gonna manage this with medication by lowering your blood sugar levels. And you can basically consume what you want to consume. And if we need to, we'll just up the dose. And again, we can eventually put you on insulin. Number 8, snacking is the best thing for a type 2 diabetic. Wrong again. My doctor used to tell me to have several snacks and small meals throughout the day so that I would be able to keep my metabolism level up, which would help my diabetes. When in fact, the actual science shows us very clearly that something like intermittent fasting and getting control of our diet is what would actually help control our diabetes. Snacking all day long, if you think about it, does nothing more than increase our blood sugar levels all day long and our insulin levels. Now, the caveat to this is, and you'll want to keep in mind, if you are currently on medication to raise your serum insulin levels, you may still need to have small snacks throughout the day in order to not have an issue with hypoglycemia, so super low blood sugar. But once you are starting to get your blood sugars under control and you are able to start reducing your amount of medication and maybe get off the medication, then I would no longer suggest snacking and I would begin to consider intermittent fasting. Number 9, adding tons of protein to your diet will help with type 2 diabetes. Wrong again. For those who have type 2 diabetes, you may actually experience delayed spike in blood sugars hours after having a lot of protein. So you will have some that say there's no spike in blood sugar from protein. And the issue is that proteins actually take a lot longer for our body to metabolize than carbs. So most people will eat their meal and whatever is in the meal, if they're having a few carbs and whatever and a protein and that type of thing, and then they'll check their blood sugars as we're told to 2 hours after the meal. What they would find though, if they were having lots of protein, I'm talking about it's good to have a certain amount of protein. We talked about that earlier, that proteins are needed. But if, on the other hand, if you were to actually consume a ton of protein and then check your blood sugar levels about 5 or 6 hours after eating, that is when you might notice a spike in your blood glucose levels. In fact, now we're going to talk about causation and correlation. There are some studies that do show a positive correlation between frequent and large consumption of red meat and poultry and going on to develop type 2 diabetes. But again, correlation does not equal causation, and there probably could be a lot more studies done on that. If you're consuming proteins with your meals, you may notice that your insulin needs are increased when you're having those meals with lots of protein. I'd kind of be interested to know in the comments below, if you are somebody who's type 2 diabetic, if you experience issues with having a lot of protein. And I would encourage you, if you do have type 2 diabetes and you are trying to consume lots of protein bars and shakes and powder on a regular basis, that maybe that is something you want to consider removing from your diet, and see how your blood glucose levels are at that time. And number 10, caloric restriction is the only way to lose weight. Wrong again. I saved this for last because it is, to me, one of the biggest lies told. When we understand that calories are not what got us into this situation and this mess called insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, we understand that calories are not what are going to get us out of the situation. To put it simply, when we restrict our caloric intake, our bodies do slow down and we use fewer calories. Fat accumulation, overall weight gain, is actually based on hormonal signals that we receive from the food that we eat, and not the overall consumption of calories. So, when we understand that obesity is due to hormone imbalance because of excessive insulin, and we understand that the dominance of insulin is what is needed to change in order to reduce obesity, there's probably a really good chance that the doctor that you're seeing when it comes to your blood sugar levels and insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes has not really taken the time to at least explain to you generally what it is that is going on in your body and what has led to insulin resistance and possibly type 2 diabetes. When you are consuming a diet that is full of carbs and sugar and processed sugars, your all of that stuff, all of the sugars in those foods is absorbed in your gastrointestinal tract, and high fructose corn syrup in the processed foods and the hidden sugars. And the pancreas works to release insulin and help get the glucose from the blood, known as blood sugar, into the cells. If we're always consuming sugar and carbs, though, and processed foods loaded with the hidden sugars, and the body is always having to work harder at releasing more insulin to get the abundance of sugar from the blood and into the cells. Over time, our cells become resistant to receiving any more sugar. The cells are full of sugar, so more insulin is produced. And then you can understand that the blood sugars are up and insulin is up, right? So we become insulin resistance. And it's actually not that we don't have enough insulin in our body. Now, we're not talking about diabetes type 1, so I want to be very clear about that. That is a whole separate issue. But for us that I used to have type 2 diabetes, so I can speak from experience. But for those people who are experiencing type 2 diabetes, it's not that you're not producing enough insulin. So please change your way of thinking about that. It is actually that there is too much insulin in your body and you are experiencing what is known as hyperinsulinemia. There are going to be two types of people in my mind when it comes to diabetes and a diabetes diagnosis. There are going to be those who wish to believe that this is chronic, there's nothing you can do about it, and that it's progressive, and type 2 diabetes is progressive and there's no way to reverse it. So you're going to go in, take the metformin, and eventually go on to insulin. And there's the other type of person who is actually going to wish to make some changes to their diet, Maybe include some physical activity and overcome and reverse type 2 diabetes. And this is all about being your own best health advocate and doing your research and not just taking what your doctor says to the bank. So, if this video has been informative for you, I ask that you give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more health and nutrition information and information on insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. If you've not already watched my video about the 15 things that happen when you stop eating sugar, be sure to check here. This is a great video. And I do look forward to seeing you again next time. And until then, stay healthy.